Hello everyone. We are continuing on with week 2 in our theme of democracy. I'm going to begin with some opening words. It is said that ministers are here to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. I say we are all afflicted and we are all comfortable. May our time together this morning be a comfort and a confrontation. May we here find peace in times of tumult. May we here invite tumult into our lives of peace. May we here find calm in times of restlessness. May we here allow restlessness to evolve into action. Let this be the place you consider what you've never considered. Let this be the place you imagine for yourself, something new and unthinkable. May this hour bring dreams of new ways of being in the world. Come, let us worship together. I'm now going to move on to our chalice lighting. I am going to light the chalice in front of me. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, feel free to light it as well. This chalice burns with twin flames. The first flame burns for those who seek and defend the right to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, so that each person may live according to conscience in a democratically elected society. The second flame burns for the defenders of freedom, working against those who would impose their own religious beliefs on others through intimidation or legislation. May we tend this fire always, ever vigilant and courageous in the struggle for freedom and justice for all. Our first reading today is called, What on Earth is Worth Saving? On Monday, everything in the rural counties north of Knoxville was on fire, or seemed like it. A dry yellow fog settled into the valley, carrying a bitter scent. Tennessee State Forestry officials reported 20 wildfires. Most of the fires, they said, were from arson. On Election Day, there was an air alert. The fires went on. One burned down 100 acres of wood. Who would have gone and done something like that? What made them want to go out and lash out and burn it all down? What fueled such great anger? What made these lost souls not know what on earth is worth saving? A friend said maybe arson wasn't the only reason for all the harm done. Maybe some was from carelessness. This morning, where I live, the smoke has cleared away. But in our nation, a bitter fog has settled in, making it hard to breathe, hard to see. Countless of us still greet the day, still in something like shock, wondering what led to so many in our democracy to want to go out and lash out and burn it all down, wondering how much could be traced back to carelessness, wondering how many lives are at risk, and how on earth we will live. In the book of Esther, in the Hebrew scripture, Esther finds herself at a similar pivotal moment. King Xerxes, ruler of the Persian Empire, is reckless, extravagant, and not all that bright, endangering all who rule under his erratic rule. In his dull vanity, Xerxes sentences all of the Jews in the kingdom to death. At this moment of peril, Esther's cousin Mordecai appeals to her for help because Esther, who is Jewish herself, enjoys a position of privilege in the empire. She is reluctant to risk it, but Mordecai tells her it's not certain in the coming wrath that her privilege would save her. Help, he concedes, might possibly come from elsewhere, but he concludes, who's to say whether you've come to this place and position for such a time as this? This morning, we awake to a democracy set recklessly, carelessly ablaze, and the fire has only now started to spread. It reaches far beyond federal policy or the Supreme Court. It reaches elementary classrooms where there is now further license to bully. My wife has started to call the migrant families she works with, whose neighbors have chanted at them, "Build the wall." Those of us with some privilege in this empire may be tempted to seek refuge in it, as if privilege was ever going to save us. But who is to say whether you've come to this place and privilege for such a time as this? Upon hearing this question, Esther doesn't leap into action, doesn't issue a statement, doesn't post a quip on Facebook. She knows what's asked of her is nothing less than to risk her safety, her life. So she asks her people to fast and pray with her. She takes time to prepare herself for what life now requires. That's what time it is for us, all together. Time to reflect, to be still, to feel all the feelings, and to prepare ourselves. Who's to say whether, in fact, we were made for such a time as this? This next reading is A Blessing for the Front Lines. Oh, you rebel, you queer and wayward child, you abandoned and listless, you angry and forgotten, you black and brown and indigenous, you homeless and impoverished, you dreamer, you warrior. You are not alone here. You have never been alone. Not in this place, not in this time, not in the whole of history. There have always been ones like you. There will always be ones like you. We have always fought. In the papers, in the streets, with paint cans and with pens, through tear gas and water cannons, in your armor inadequate, in your fear and your rage. You have never been alone. Plant your feet like the 1,000-year oak. Scream like the ghosts of your ancestors. Light your hearts on fire with the ashes of all the dead sons. Today's sermon is called Safe and Profoundly Unsound by Victoria E. Safford. Step 1. Invoke an external and internal threat. Pose it as a threat to civilization itself. Create a sense of overwhelming crisis beyond the reach of any traditional solution. Insist that the leader's superior instinct and access to privileged knowledge are more reliable than universal reason. Step 2. Establish secret prisons. Suspend judicial processes and the right to habeas corpus, if only for certain sectors of the population. Establish military tribunals side by side with civilian courts. Establish a policy of necessary state-sanctioned torture, and let all these measures quietly be made public. Confound the public understanding of human rights and civil rights. Step 3. Develop a paramilitary force. Deploy mercenaries abroad and encourage domestic intimidation at election sites and public demonstrations, for example. Step 4. Watch ordinary citizens monitor private correspondence, telephone and electronic networks, hubs of information such as libraries and schools. Make it known that to place your name on a petition or list of supporters or donors to a cause may suggest subversion. Step 5. Infiltrate citizens groups. Intimidate grassroots organizations. Encumber free assembly. Step 6. Arbitrarily detain and release citizens. Establish lists of citizens under suspicion. Step 7. Target key individuals. Monitor the speech and activity of popular figures, college and university faculty, artists, progressive religious leaders, and their institutions. Step 8. restrict the access of the press, threaten journalists with prison at home and violence abroad, flood the media with misinformation. Step 9. Cast criticism as espionage and dissent as treason. Step 10. Subvert the rule of law. Naomi Wolf is a journalist and author who has studied the ways that totalitarian regimes and fascist governments typically have come to power. She enumerates these in the steps above. Like many historians, she concludes that most often it is not a thunderous, violent coup that open societies have been eclipsed and dictatorships arisen, though this kind of action may be the final straw. Rather, she says, repression tends to creep in quietly, stealthily, on muffled paws, with no single action, however oppressive, likely by itself to alarm the general population. From the mid-19th century through the entire 20th, she says democracies have been overthrown and dictatorships have arisen in countries where most of these 10 steps have been advanced. In her book, The End of America, Letter of Warning to a Young Patriot, she says she does not mean to imply that the current administration is systematically marching through this checklist, but she does mean to warn that in recent years, our leaders have deliberately, not accidentally, assaulted the premises of the Constitution and freedoms we take so easily for granted that they are to us like air, invisible, have been eroded beyond the possibility of repair in our lifetime. Wolf wrote the book as a gift for a young couple she admires. It took shape as she was watching them dance at their wedding. The young woman had been Wolf's student, a gifted writer from Texas. The young man is a Vietnamese American teacher who helps run a national suicide prevention hotline. She says, they are the kind of idealistic young Americans who need to lead our nation out of this crisis. It seemed to me they needed one more wedding present, tools to realize and defend their freedom, and means to be sure that their own children would be born in liberty. She opens the book with words from Justice William O. Douglas. As nightfall does not come all at once, neither does oppression. In both instances, there is a twilight when everything remains seemingly unchanged. And it is in such a twilight that we all must be aware of change in the air, however slight, lest we become unwitting victims of the darkness. Think of someone young you love, dancing, maybe dancing at a wedding. Dancing, working, studying, wondering, asking bright questions, and twilight is falling. Think about watching a child you love, or maybe a child you don't even know, maybe children here. Think about their future as Americans. Think about them singing when they go back to school, as I imagine they still do. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring. What do you think about that? What do you fear on their behalf? This is not the country that we grew up in. Their America is different. It is a hard time to be young, but even harder, I think, is to be an ally of the young, knowing what we know. How do we instill in them a sense of reliable, durable hope, but not only that? How do we plant in them also a sense of responsible, proud citizenship? A sense of identity not laced with nationalism, arrogance, and manifest destiny, but graceful identity, worn with dignity, grounded in open-eyed history. How do we give them a sense of pride, a sense of humility, a sense of great possibility, a sense of belonging as Americans, to the United States, the United Peoples of the world. Wolf writes, "We take our American liberty for granted the way we take our natural resources for granted, seeing both, rather casually, as being magically self-replenishing. We have not noticed how vulnerable either resource is until very late in the game, when systems start to falter. We have been slow to learn that liberty, like nature, demands a relationship with us in order for it to continue to sustain us. Most of us only have a faint understanding of how societies open up or close down, become supportive of freedom or ruled by fear. One reason for our vagueness about how liberty lives or dies is that we've tended lately to subcontract out the tasks of the patriot to the professionals. Lawyers, scholars, activists, politicians worry about understanding the Constitution and protecting our rights, the way that we hire professionals to do taxes. They can keep democracy up and running. We're busy. What kind of relationship do we want our children to have with liberty? What kind of relationship do we intend to have with it ourselves?" Taped to the wall above my computer is a color photo clipped from the Star Tribune, a close-up of two women at the Minneapolis airport. One, with her back to the camera, is holding a baby. One is wearing handcuffs and a face of abject anguish. She's reaching for the baby with tissues in her hands, sobbing. The caption reads, "Before she was to be deported and flown to Nicaragua, Nadia Vallecillo pleaded with immigration and customs enforcement agents to remove her handcuffs so she could hold her son Jared. Immigration agents arrested her in her house in the night, and they almost took her away before she could tell them that the baby was there asleep in his crib. The two were taken to the airport, where Nadia was informed that though she must leave the country, her son, who is a U.S. citizen, could stay. 'With whom?' she asked. And they were both flown to New York, where they were separated because the baby did not have a passport to continue to Managua. In the last moment, before the plane left, someone intervened. A temporary stay was granted, and many hours later, Nadia and Jared were flown back to Minnesota and returned to their house. There they will remain until the baby's passport has been issued, and then, at any moment without warning, her deportation process will begin again. They are legion: factory workers, gardeners, nannies, cooks, construction workers, neighbors. Many are afraid to go to work, for fear they may be taken while their children are at school. Many are afraid to go home, for fear their children may have said something inadvertently to the wrong person about their undocumented status. This wave of terror is almost imperceptible to the wide majority of us, the white majority of us. It doesn't really touch us, or so we imagine, not yet. Who belongs here? Who doesn't? Who says so and why? I look at her in handcuffs in the airport, crying for her child, and wonder what exactly is the threat she poses. On the scale of yellow, orange, and red alerts, where do she and baby Jared fall? The big sign flashing on the road to the airport urges us to report all suspicious activity. I can think of few things more suspect than taking a mother who is not a criminal from her infant by force in the middle of the night and deporting her to a country from which she may never be able to return to see him or hold him or mother him again. Why are we afraid of her? The immigration issue is about economics, as it has always been, and it's about security, as it has always been. But at its core, it is about fear and racism and power and manipulation. It appears to base an ancient instincts deep within us, not only that primal fear of the other, but also an even more irrational fear of change and loss of control, loss of the known world, America the Beautiful. Nydia's threat to us is that she is here, now, working 9 to 5, paying taxes, playing by the rules, keeping her home, raising her child, speaking English, speaking Spanish, and in every way, every day, showing us the face, the complexion, the complexity of the orientation, the character, and the culture of the 21st century American person. 100 years ago, she was Italian, Russian, a Jew from elsewhere in Eastern Europe. 150 years ago, she was Chinese, Irish, German, Swedish, and Norwegian. And now, of course, she is the supporting character in the great drama of the so-called War on Terror. As a so-called alien, she's a real and present danger to the so-called homeland. Fear has been a force since long before the war in Iraq, or the establishment of the U.S. Patriot Act, or the Military Commissions Act, which sanctions secret prisons, or the Office of Homeland Security, or the dismissal of all those attorneys last year, or the shredding of tortured documents. Mohakov's collection is called Emails from Scheherazade. She has another poem called Hijab, Scene Number 7, written in 1995. No, I am not bald under the scarf. No, I am not from that country where women cannot drive cars. No, I would not like to defect. I am already American. But thank you for offering. What else do you need to know relevant to my buying insurance, opening a bank account, reserving a seat on a flight? Yes, I speak English. Yes, I carry explosives. They're called words, and if you don't get up off your assumptions, they're going to blow you away. One of the assumptions with which I struggle always is the notion I can be a citizen without being a vigilant patriot. That because I am unlikely to be deported or detained offshore, I can leave the hard questions and the hard work to someone else, subcontracting out my share of the work of democracy. But I know that is not true. We, from a long line of heretics, who have professed many beliefs, blasphemous and orthodox, about all kinds of things both sacred and profane. The freedom to speak, whatever the speech, the freedom to believe, whatever the belief, is the heart of the matter for us. In centuries past, Unitarians and Universalists were burned at the stake. They were tortured in dungeons. Their books were burned, their churches destroyed, their livelihoods ruined for holding to their truths, for refusing to recant, refusing comply with governments or bishops or mobs. In defense of the free mind, heart, spirit, soul, and community, they died in Prague, Geneva, Krakow, London, Dachau, Selma. We come from a long line of dissenters and dissidents who died for this faith, and from others who survived, like the ones who wrote the organizing statement in New England, respecting in each other and in all the right of intellect and conscience to be free. We set up no theological conditions of membership, no ID cards, no pledge of allegiance to any creed, no fences for the spirit. And in recognizing the brotherhood of the human race, they wrote, and the equality of human rights, we make no distinction as to the conditions and rights of membership in this society on account of sex or color or nationality. That was written in 1863. At the height of the Civil War. And though that particular church was in the north, not everyone in the neighborhood was prepared to go that far. Most citizens and congregations were not prepared to go that far, especially when it was not yet clear which side would win the war. To Unitarians, that didn't matter. The congregation welcomed slaves, women, heretics, and true believers, anyone who had an honest aim to make the search for truth the rule of life. What mattered was freedom and conscience. How far do we need to be prepared to go? What matters now to us, the descendants and inheritors of such a noble legacy? In 1998, Mohakhaf wrote a poem after 120 people were killed in a movie theater and a small adjacent mosque in Algiers. This is part of the last verse. I am a disbeliever in everything but the purity of the bodies of the men and women with or without the veil, with or without the markings of right identity, in everything but the suppleness of the children. I am a disbeliever in every scripture in the world that leaves out, how was the movie? I love you. I love you. Whatever we variously believe, we are disbelievers in anything but the basic humanity of everyone, the freedom and beauty of everyone, the dignity and worth of everyone, the belonging of everyone. We are believers in the responsibility of everyone, of all of us, each of us, no matter how frightened we are in these frightening times, to be something other than afraid. This next reading is called Gird Thyself. This is not a prayer that you may find hope, for hope is a luxury that some cannot find and others cannot afford. This is not a prayer that you find more love in the world, though I hope you continue to feel love and send love to those near and far. I pray instead that you may find tools, a hammer lying half hidden in the grass, a roll of duct tape curled and forgotten high on a shelf in the back of a closet, a wrench poking out of the back pocket of a stranger. Take these tools and gird thyself. A hammer for justice, duct tape to hold together your broken heart, a wrench to grip and provide advantage, implying torque to turn objects or turn the world. Take these tools and others you may find in places expected and unexpected. Take these tools and gird thyself, for weeping may last through the night, but the work begins in the morning. It is time to extinguish the chalice. I am going to blow out the candle in front of me. If you have lit a candle at home, feel free to blow it out as well. We extinguish the chalice here, that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. May it guide your way until we are together again. Our closing words are go in peace, seeking justice. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace, seeking justice. I mean, go in peace, committed to equal rights and opportunity for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace. Thank you for listening today. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Make sure you fill out your ballots and vote. Make sure they end up back in that drop box, because our democracy